Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under, here today to discuss the final game of the season. It's been a long one, it's been a great one for us, and we're coming to the conclusion now as we take on Man United at Old Trafford. Here to discuss it all, I have Elton. How are we going?
Good morning. Well, for us, it's good morning. Great. I'm cold, but I'm excited, and I'm a little bit wistful that it's all coming to an end.
Yeah, it does feel a bit that way. We're right at the very end of what's been a really fun season to cover as a podcast, and yeah, it's kind of sad that we're not going to be able to talk about games for the next couple of months at least. But we'll still find a lot of content in the off season, I'm sure. And Sammy here to join us as well. How you going, Sammy?
I am phlegmy. I'm phlegmy, but I'm good. I'm good, and yeah, I always like a pregame because like you can always dream in a pregame. You can create narratives. You can write a script for yourself, and it will eventually be wrong. And yeah, it's sad that we won't be script writing for a bit anymore. So let the nostalgia begin.
Yeah, classic overshare from Sam to start off our final pod for the previews for this season. But yeah, look, as you said, it is sad that we're not going to be able to talk about games for a little while. It's been so enjoyable going into a lot of games this season where, previously in a Premier League season, you come into a game, preview it and go, oh, God, I hope we can pull something off here. We need a bit of a miracle to get points. We're about to talk about this Man United game, and I think we're probably all on the same page looking at it and going, we could pick up 3 points here quite comfortably. We've played Man United a few times this season. I think we've actually been fairly dominant in most of those games. Unfortunately, the results haven't gone our way, but in the 70 minutes before everything kicked off in the FA Cup game, we were the better side by far. In the game before the World Cup, I'd say we were the better side, and we got undone by a moment of magic at the very end. It's kind of nice though going into all of these games this year, Dad, and being really positive and thinking that we're going to take maximum points away from pretty much all of them.
I think this is a even more, well, not strange, but it's got a weirder feeling about it in that I think Sam's completely right in saying that you can dream and no one can say you're wrong in a pre-match situation.
It's very easy to be right.
Yeah, well, but I really think that anything could happen in this game, and I don't think I'm being, silly about that. I believe that we will be prepared and pumped like no other, but I couldn't call the result realistically.
I can never call the result, but Man U just cleared. They're in the Champions League now. They pretty much only have FA Cup to worry about, which is completely separate from the last day of the Prem. Man United really cleaned up in the past couple of weeks, as in they were not I don't want to say disarray at the start of the season, but they've really Ten Hag's really kind of got it together a little bit more, and a lot of those players seem to be gelling, and obviously Casemiro and Sancho are actually coming into their own. But with all that said, I still think that this is like a poetry redemption story in my mind, and I think that there is a serious opportunity here. It almost kind of feels like pre-Chelsea, pre-Chelsea this season. I'm not sure if you guys felt it, but in my bones, I was like, I can see it. I
think you've felt like that in every single game this season.
Not every single game. I'm not having that for 1 second. Any Man City game, not having it. And Newcastle as well. I remember you guys were like, Newcastle, they're nothing. And then the Champions League, though, they bitched us. I remember.
Yeah. We got absolutely flogged by Newcastle, but that was also down to losing a player after about 3 minutes. I think the red card there. Like but yeah, look, there's a few talking points there, and we'll sort of get onto them when we get a bit deeper into the game. But Man U have done really well. They were struggling early season. We saw that, and they've done superbly to lock in Champions League. We saw a lot of big teams struggle this year. Really, Liverpool finally got their act together and will finish in 5th and lock in Europa League next season. But for Man United to lock in the Champions League from where they were, they've done really, really well. The one thing to consider with this game coming up is, as you said, Sammy, they've got an FA Cup final to think about. They're playing Man City, so it's a Manchester derby in a cup final. It's going to be, I would have thought, front of their minds, because for them now, the Premier League season's finished. Doesn't really matter now if you finish 3rd or 4th. They're playing Champions League football next season either way. All they really need from this game is a point to guarantee 3rd. But again, you know, we're talking for Fulham. We talk a lot about those extra positions, giving the financial incentive to finish higher up the table. For Man United, they don't need an extra £2 million for finishing one place higher. It's a drop in the ocean for them when they've got Champions League locked in for next season, which is going to probably bring in 100 million, if not more. They've got an FA Cup final, which doesn't bring in a huge amount of cash, but winning a trophy, or rather stopping. But it's also stopping Man City from that treble that they're chasing. You know, Man City really want to win that treble, and it's the treble that Man United won back in '99. And if Man United can, you know, actually put a stick in the wheel of Man City, which just keeps on turning and keeps on rolling over everyone else, that's a big thing for them. You know, imagine if it was us playing against Chelsea in a cup final and knowing that we could stop Chelsea from winning a treble. Fulham would be giving just that extra bit more. So I think, Man, you are really going to be focused on that FA Cup final.
Yeah.
Well, I really expect that there's going to be a bit of rotation from Man United. You talk about Casemiro and some of those important players under Ten Hag who have been pivotal to their form this season. I suggest we're going to see a bit of youth come into the team. And some of those key players rested to make sure they don't get injured with one game to go. This game's a write-off for Man United. And it kind of is for Fulham as well. The only thing on the line for Fulham is a record points total. And so I think we're going to be taking it a bit more seriously than Man United. Not that it's going to be a walkover, but I think there's far more on the line for them in terms of players getting injured or even, I'm not sure if suspensions carry over for the FA Cup, but I think they might do. So I reckon there's a bit more jeopardy for Man United there.
It's really interesting as well. Yeah.
Sorry, Sam. Just a quick. Go on.
Okay, you're getting your point. No, you get your point in. You know, you shoehorned it. Go on.
I was simply going to say I think it's more than just the points record for Fulham. I think it's actually. I think there's a score to settle. I do.
Yeah, I totally do. The only thing that I was going to say is because I do think you're right. I do think they will structure it a little bit differently because it is a bit of a write-off for them. The only thing is I'm not really sure like how Ten Hag would like structure his team around that, because if you take somebody like Guardiola, who like famously will just rest players pretty openly and shamelessly if he feels that he needs to, and he's resting them for something else, whereas other managers are more inclined to just keep their players fresh, keep their players good. So maybe he will put out not necessarily like a full starting lineup, but have just like a lot of rotation on the day, but just make sure like Casemiro gets some legs in so he's still warm for like FA Cup final. I don't really know how Ten Hag works in that respect. So
I think when you're a player like Casemiro who has so much experience, it's similar to if we wanted to rest Willian, for example. I think it would be fine to rest Willian for a week to give him just that extra bit of recovery time. And I don't think it would massively affect him. I think someone like Casemiro is a perfect example of a player who's a little bit older who could do with just having a week off, and it wouldn't massively affect his performance going into the next game. I assume Man City are going to do... Yeah, I think Man City will do the same thing as well, though, that they'll rest players because they've got an FA Cup final coming up as well, and they don't need to play a full team. So you'll still see... You'll still see a core group, but I think there'll be some changes.
The only problem when Man City rest players, no one notices because they're also damn good.
It's actually so funny. So like I was listening to like The Athletic that was talking about this. I know we're just kind of going off on a tangent, but I don't care. And they were talking about Haaland, and it was like because it's actually crazy to think about like how many goals he scored. When Pep just pretty much the second that he scored like one, maybe two, he just takes them off. So he's very rarely actually played like a full game in like the Prem, like from start to finish, just because like once his job's done, he just kind of moves him off, and that's how he keeps him fit. And that was like the reason why he went to City over Real Madrid, because he didn't want to play every game at Real Madrid.
Anyway, we're not a Man City podcast, so back on the topic. Let's have a look at the timings for this game. It's a slightly strange kickoff time. I always thought final day of the season. I know sometimes it's played on a Sunday, but I thought it was an earlier kickoff, if anything. But it's a 4:30 p.m. kickoff in the UK on Sunday. That's 11:30 p.m. on the west coast of Australia, 1:30 a.m. on the Monday morning for the east coast of Australia. In the US, it's an 8:30 a.m. Pacific kickoff and an 11:30 a.m. Eastern kickoff on Sunday, the 28th of May.
So
we'll have a quick look.
Yeah, really,
it's going to be well, especially on a work night as well. It's a pretty rough one for us, but
it's brutal.
It has to be done. It's the last time for a few months, so it's worth the pain for a few days. Looking at the recent form for Fulham, it's been better form recently with a few results coming through the door. 2-2 draw against Crystal Palace most recently. The 2-0 win against Southampton, the 5-3 win against Leicester, and then the 1-0 loss to Liverpool and the 2-1 loss to Man City. Although good performances there. Man United are on a pretty good run at the moment, although they haven't had the hardest games. And really, if you look at these games across the board for Man United, they probably should have been taking 12, 13 points minimum, and they've only taken 9. A 4-1 win against Chelsea locked in Champions League football for them. A 1-0 win against Bournemouth away from home, 2-0 against Wolves, and then a 1-0 loss against West Ham and a 1-0 loss against Brighton. Dad, looking at those recent results, does it tell a bit of a story about Man United, or do you think it's hard to actually extrapolate any information from those?
Well, I see a kind of contradiction in what you said and what I agree with, and that recently, compared to the first half of the season, they've really come good and are getting good results, and as a result, have ended up fourth, possibly third, but let's call it fourth. And they have done well and they're a force. But to lose in the last 5 games, to lose to West Ham and even to Brighton, who are obviously a good side and competitive, Man United shouldn't be losing to either of those two sides. So there is a question mark there. They are fallible. And if you guys are right, or if we're right in that they do decide to now set their sights on, the FA Cup and doing well there, when, let's face it, only some people would watch the highlights or replays of all games in the Premier League on any given Saturday or any given weekend. But when it comes to the FA Cup, everyone's going to be watching. Everyone. And it's a local derby. And it's not just, well, you can put a wheel in the spoke of Man City, but it's actually a tribal thing. It's a local derby. And so it's huge pride for them. And I tend to agree with you that even though they don't have to, and they'd want to be professional and end the season strong, I think they will probably. And it's not like, when we talk about our youngsters and the fact that we ought to have the right setting at Fulham, we ought to play our youngsters and ought to create an environment where we're bringing people through. But, sides like Man City, Liverpool, Man United actually have really, really, really talented youth. Yeah. So bringing them on is not that big a risk because it's more a fact that, geez, we really ought to be giving them some game time. They're pretty good. They're well capable of actually taking a part, where we must still feel like, outside of Luke Harris, any other youngster is a massive roll of the dice. It could work. It could be a total disaster. right?
Mm.
So
yeah, when
I think
you look at
you go, Jack.
Sorry, yeah, you look at guys like Garnacho who came in and played against us in that final game before the World Cup.
Brilliant.
The Man United youth, if you want to call them that, and youngsters and up and coming players would slot into most Premier League teams. When you look at players like that, you just go, yeah, okay, like you're resting players, but you're not really getting a rest as an opposition club because Garnacho almost snuck his way into the World Cup squad, and that's a World Cup winning squad. It's definitely not giving us like an easy run by slotting in a couple of these young guys who will probably go on to have incredible careers in the Premier League or Serie A or around the rest of Europe. These are
guaranteed. It's not a maybe.
These are serious players, and you may not have never heard of them, but you will eventually. There's going to be guys like Elanga probably getting a game. He's young.
Yeah, he's really good. He's really good.
Zidane Iqbal, who's very well considered. Garnacho will probably get a game. They've got a couple of young English guys as well. And Man United have always been good at bringing through their youth players as well.
Yeah.
Think under Ferguson how many times they gave opportunities to some of those youngsters, and they turned out to be blokes like Michael Carrick, who goes on to have these incredible careers. And I expect we'll see some rotation and a few guys thrown into the deep end, which is exactly why Man United are so successful, because they can do it, and they don't lose out massively by doing so.
I was just going to say, with Man United as well, because they have so much squad depth, adding in those youth players actually gives them a pretty decent opportunity, and there's not as much pressure on them. It's literally just kind of go out and do your best. Whereas if we're comparing it to somebody like Luke Harris, in my opinion, when Luke Harris comes on and plays, he has to be at the standard of like Pereira and Tom Kearney, because it's a different dynamic. I mean, you see it all the time in teams like Southampton as well when they bring up youth players, and you have to expect so much of them. It's different at Man United. They can literally just go out and just be that chaotic kind of rustle bustle, whereas like you still have to play a role when you're in a youth player at teams like Fulham.
Maybe
at Man United as well, you've got so much quality around you that you can drop a youth player in, and they'll be carried by the players around them.
Maybe it's the point that we're really missing whenever we have a discussion about youth at Fulham, and the frustration and the disappointment we feel, and where we feel it's not being done right. Maybe it's as simple as this: that the Man United, the Man City, maybe the top three clubs, certainly Liverpool, Man United, Man City. I wouldn't classify the so-called youth in the same category as everyone else's youth. I would actually classify them as players who aren't getting a go. They're probably already like Jack said, they're almost guaranteed to become very good, absolute top players, if not incredible internationals somewhere else.
So, like, you've actually got really. There's a I just got very excited. I got very excited because so like with teams like
you
Man
talk about
City,
Tifo now.
I'm actually not going to talk about Tifo. I'm actually going to talk about something else. But with teams like Man City, Man U, like Liverpool, all those teams, they actually have like associate clubs like all over the world that are linked to those clubs. So it's a bit different with clubs like Fulham that are really just going within like their local area. And when you're dealing with a place like London, you have a really, really good reach. It's really, really awesome kind of, and obviously you have like associate clubs that like you work closely with, but the reach of like those top six, like those big clubs, they've got spots all over the world scouting, and
but it's just money, guys.
Jack's shaking
his
head.
Money.
Jack's shaking his head. Why are you shaking
your head? I'm shaking my head because they do have that, but how many players from Melbourne City, which is a Man City affiliated club, are now playing at Man City? How many players
they're not
New
York
there. New York City? Is it New York City? They don't actually pick up youngsters through those systems. The reason they pick up youngsters is because they're Man City and they've won the league 5 times out of the last 6. and people want to play for Man City. Unfortunately, Fulham have a global scouting reach. Fulham scout players from all over the world and get players into the youth setup. The problem is, if a youth player gets offered, do you want to come to Fulham or do you want to go to Man United? They'll go to Man United because how good to have gone to Man United. You saw it with your mate.
It's money and good management, guys.
Who got picked up by Liverpool. He got offers from other clubs as well, but if Liverpool come knocking, you go to Liverpool, even though you don't potentially get an opportunity to actually do anything there. And then you find yourself at another club afterwards as well. But look, I think the biggest thing is if you have a look at where we are this season, it's the final day of the season, and we're still fighting to reach a target, reach a goal. And most clubs in the league, I don't think there's any clubs apart from maybe like Palace, West Ham and Wolves, who with 3 games to go could sort of breathe easy and weren't really aiming for anything. Everyone else, up until the last day of the season, had something to play for. And that's why we're unable to actually push youth into the team, because we have to put out the best possible team at all opportunities to keep pushing. The thing about Man United is they can just slip a youth player into their starting lineup and it won't make a huge difference, because one tiny weak point in their side isn't going to actually collapse the whole team. With a team like Fulham, where you get limited opportunities going forward, for example, if Luke Harris misses a one-on-one that Pereira probably would have scored, it has a major effect on the rest of your season. It just doesn't if you're Man United.
Yeah, no, totally.
I think, honestly, I think clearly there's a lot of frustration, and it's widely felt. People talk about it all the time. Fulham supporters I'm talking about. But I actually think there's a huge cause for optimism, because if, let's say, I don't know enough about it to know how good a youth system Newcastle have, for example. And I say Newcastle because I'm talking about a club that just recently got a huge amount of funding, which obviously
we're going to get a lot better.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think it takes, you could buy a bunch of experienced players in if you've got a lot of money, and it might take you 2 or 3 years for that to gel. But even Chelsea, when Abramovich first came in, took a lot longer than that, even with billions being thrown at it, took a lot longer than that to actually make a decent competitive unit. But let's say you get that right and you have the right management and you just do it really smart. It still takes a number of seasons, but I think to build an academy there's a lot of staff involved in having a really good academy, and to actually build a production line and a machine that is very, very successful at turning out good players takes a long time. It's like building a university. And so I actually think that if we continue to have success, if lots of money is thrown at the senior team, and we get ourselves into really great positions where we can afford to possibly buy an even better young talent, which gives you a greater probability of producing the Garnachos of the future, or in higher numbers, the future's bright because we've actually got the infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think is the coaching side of that. And that's one thing Fulham have done really well. Steve Wigley leads under 21s, and he's been incredibly successful with the number of players that he's brought through the Fulham system. And you know, if you do look at just the last 7 or 8 years, when we've had Moussa Dembele Jr. come through, you've had Patrick Roberts, you've had Harvey Elliott, Sessegnon, Carvalho. These are like pretty high quality players playing in top leagues now, who've all come through the Fulham youth system. And so they've been identified by someone and picked up and put into the academy. They've been properly nurtured through the academy. One major thing is the fact that our under-21s team has always been really strong and always performed really well. They're not, obviously not going to be quite at the same level as Man United and Man City, who have, you know, the cream of the crop and get the best pick of players from all over the country. A lot of Fulham's youth side is made up of English players, which is kind of good, especially with the fact that you do need English players in your squad to hit certain registration marks that are required. So it's definitely something that we can hang our hat on and say we're doing really well. There's some works going on at Motswell Park in the next, hopefully, couple of years. I don't know if you saw some of the plans that got updated quite recently, but Fulham bought, it's basically the lot across the road from Motswell Park, which I think used to be owned by the BBC, and they're developing one side. The new side will become for the first team and will be kitted out beautifully for the first team. And then the other side, which is the current Motswell Park, will basically be solely dedicated to the youth teams and to the women's teams as well, which is really good. It's a big step forward because Motswell Park is not a huge facility. And to share that between the first team and the youth team, it isn't ideal. What we're going to be able to do is give the youth team a much better base to actually base themselves from. Hopefully give Motswell Park as a venue, as in as a little stadium, a bit of an upgrade as well. Have a few more facilities there to get people down to watch games a bit more often, and hopefully that translates in turn to some better production of youth players as well, because it's a place that they want to go. It's all just constant building.
To me, it is as simple as it's just money. We're not a stupid club. It's just money, because imagine we're playing consistent Champions League, and I don't think that's if this all goes well for Tony Khan's belief in Silva. Don't tell me Silva can't do this and get us into a Champions League position in the next 3 or 4 years. It's quite possible. And if you start looking at a future, I believe it, Sam. I do believe it. And if you start looking at a future where you can realistically get an extra £100 million through the door every year, the academy is going to be getting an extra £5 or £10 million a year.
Can I offer a counterpoint to that? I think Silva is the guy to establish us as a proper mid-table club. I don't think he's the guy to get us to Champions League. I think that will need to be a different coach. That will come in at a later point. That's my honest personal opinion.
No,
I'm backing you,
don't
Marco.
agree with that. I think Silva's good enough to get us into the Champions League. It's the biggest issue for Silva has been there's a limitation on his spending, which is because of previous errors from other managers. That's going to be lifted this season, which means he's going to be able to spend more money and get the players that he actually wants.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
And so I think if you look at the players he has brought in blokes like Polina and Leno, he's able to build a squad that's good enough to finish in the top half of the Premier League straight away. And I heard a stat that if we beat Man United, I think we'll be the 10th most successful newly promoted side into the Premier League. So he's creating history there. With the Premier League's been around for 30 odd years, and that means there's been 90 teams that have come up and been promoted, and this is the 10th best side ever to be promoted potentially. You can't tell me that we can't kick on from that point.
Oh, definitely.
I think this is Marco Silva's big opportunity, and the Ten Hags, the Peps of the world had to start somewhere, and on their road to proving themselves to be greats, right? And Marco, whilst he's been, Premier League manager a couple of times, I don't think they were absolutely ideal situations and optimal situations for him to thrive. He seems to, whatever we think of Tony Khan, he seems to have a really great relationship, and he's actually earned the trust of Tony Khan. Yeah. And so that releases, a lot of money potentially. And so that you can see the whole thing sort of coming together pretty well.
I'm pretty sure Jack knows more about this than I do, but I know. Like prior to him joining us, I know he was in not necessarily a bit of disgrace, but I know that he had not necessarily the best reputation because of previous stints at Everton and Hull, I believe. And yeah, I do feel. Watford, Everton, and Hull, yeah. Like I know this has really been a bit of a redemption kind of job for him. So I would probably say this has been his best managing stint ever. It's really,
course, yeah,
it's really interesting to see like what his next kind of movements will be, because this is probably the most successful he's actually ever been in the Premier League, and I think you can really judge managers more so by their second, third, fourth seasons than their first and second.
Well, we talk about is this as far as he could take us, and maybe we need someone with a bit more experience who's got European experience and things like that. But Silva's won trophies. He was in charge of Sporting. He won trophies there. He was in charge of Estoril. I don't know if he won trophies, but he led them to 4th in the Portuguese league, which is basically the same as leading a team in the Premier League to 6th. At Olympiacos, he led them to the Champions League. Won a title as well. Like, he's won titles. The problem is he got a bit of a bad rep of not being able to do it in the Premier League, because he was with Hull, he was with Watford, he was with Everton, and as we can see now, Watford and Everton are not proven Premier League sides. Neither were Fulham, but the fact is that he brought Fulham from the Championship up to the Premier League and then did so well in the Premier League. I think he's found his groove a little bit, and he went to those clubs after his sort of European adventures, and was kind of crossing his fingers that the vibe, I guess, is right and the squad is right for what he wants to do. And now he's at Fulham, and maybe he does have a really good relationship with Tony Khan as well, and has been given the ability to buy players he wants and the money that he wants as well. So he's definitely found his niche now with Fulham, and I think he could take us far.
The point is this. The point is this. Again, it's about the release of funds and trust in the manager, right? And you could argue if Pep or Klopp or whatever had stints at Hull, Watford and Everton at those exact same times when those clubs weren't exactly screaming along, could they alone have turned around the fortunes? And I'd argue probably not.
No.
Yeah. We talked about this last week, how you have different managers for different stages and how different managers can achieve different things. Like, think of like Sean Dyches and Sam Allardyce's, who are kind of known as like specialist escape from relegation like managers. Yeah, I feel that and as I was saying before, I don't know what kind of like Silva's glass ceiling is. Like, I would hope it's literally just win the Premier League and pull a Leicester, but I just don't know.
That's because he's never had the resources, and the universe hasn't lined up for him, and I think it's lining up for him.
Yeah, no.
Well, again, he's won league titles. He's played in the Champions League. We know that he can do it at the highest level. And I think if he's given the opportunity to actually build something effectively from scratch, because if you look at the side he took over when we're in the Championship, it's a very different team now. I know there's obviously some players who've remained, but he's strengthened in a lot of positions, and I wouldn't say he's been ruthless, but he's definitely knows what he wants, and you can see that he's building something. Give a manager a couple of years, and unfortunately what happens is managers have a good first season, things dip off, and owners just kick them out instantly. I think Silva has earned himself a bit of extra time, so that even if we do have a run of bad results, there's going to be no issues around his job security. I think next season we'd have to really, pick up 9 points on our first 10 games or something terrible like that, and be in a really poor position before his position is even considered. And that's what you want as a manager, the ability to have a bit of backing and know that you can try things and they might fail, but you're not going to lose your job over it. And I think that's what Silva has at Fulham. And so I fully believe he's going to be backed in the summer, and I believe he's going to be back going forward as well. Let's have a quick look at the table, because I think firstly we need to have a bit of a chat about where Fulham are finally finishing this season, because now that we've been locked into this 10th place, I think we do need to celebrate it. But we'll look across the whole table. We see Man City obviously now running away with the title. They lead Arsenal by 8 points and have obviously been crowned champions already. Arsenal, Man U, and Newcastle all locked into Champions League positions. Liverpool take the Europa League spot. I believe Brighton will be taking a Conference League spot, or maybe even Europa League, because
conference. Yeah.
no, I think it's Europa League actually, because Man U and Man City are playing the FA Cup final together, and
True.
I don't think, and basically whoever wins the FA Cup gets a Europa League spot, and because they're both already qualified for the Champions League, that now drops to Brighton, and so it's actually a bit of a shoot-off between Villa, Tottenham, and Brentford on the final day for that final Europe position, which is the Conference League. Villa obviously in the box seat on 58 points, Tottenham on 57, Brentford on 56. So there's a high possibility that any of those teams could take the final spot. And then Fulham sitting comfortably in 10th place, 52 points, a +3 goal difference, 15 wins, 7 draws, 15 losses. Dad, just how good a season has this been from Fulham? We've set a new record for the number of wins. I believe it's one of our highest ever goal-scoring seasons. We're 1 point away from equaling our highest ever points total. Just how great has this been?
Oh, look, it's probably a bit boring for listeners to hear, but it's obviously been so entertaining, so satisfying, so great from so many aspects, and not just the points total, but having some really good wins against near neighbours and being competitive against all of London, really. And I think, as we've all talked about as well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is let's enjoy, because this is fickle. You know, you can be going like a train, and one mistake in a war will see you off. So yeah, we just got to enjoy it. You know, it's a very, very competitive space, and honestly, this season kind of, it all starts again next season. You just don't know how it happens, because you can all the money in the world, you can have the greatest start in the world, you can get a couple of red cards and a couple of really mean injuries, and it can be your season.
Yeah, well, we just don't know if this will ever happen again. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure back in when did we set the record? 07, 08, 08, 09. We were probably looking at it and going, you know, next season we're going to be playing in Europe. We're probably going to finish 5th. And then the season after that, we'll be pushing Champions League spots. But unfortunately, like you said, it's a fickle game, and things can change very, very quickly. And we just have to cross our fingers that we do kick on from here and build on this. But realistically, next season, I think the club's going to be, you know, targeting that 40 points again, and just making sure we're safe and we qualify from not qualify. We avoid relegation, and we continue to be a mid-table Premier League club, but we just don't know. So I think you're right. We do need to make the most of this, because it's a really big moment in Fulham history. It's already our second most points in Premier League history. The fact that we could potentially beat it is just unbelievable. And I don't think anyone at the start of the season believed that this could happen, apart from maybe Marco Silva. Sam, do you think we've got enough of a platform here to build on and push on, or do you think we will be looking at just avoiding relegation next season?
I definitely don't think we'd be avoiding like that. If that is the goal, it definitely shouldn't be. I think if you like it, I think the second season is really crucial for building. Just because that's when you've got the most eyes on you. That's when you've got the most opportunity. I mean, at the moment, we're selling a story. We're going to be selling that over the transfer window to actually get more players in to come into this environment and actually build upon that. It does come down to who we sign, though, because you can get great players and you can think that you've done it all right, and then you can literally just pull a Chelsea, for example, and in theory sign great players, and yeah, it just doesn't work for whatever reason. I'm pretty confident in Marco Silva, though. I think, do you know what? I think we're going to have to let some key players go and really just kind of commit to the growth in the future. I don't necessarily know who that is. I think that's more of a Marco Silva call than myself call. I haven't been personally consulted. But
I like the way you think. You think that might be more of a Marco Silva call rather than yours.
It's just like, you know, it's just like he's in the chair, so I might as well just let him have it. My FIFA career stats are pretty good, but that's off the record. I just want to put a bar on my point. I think we are going to have to like let some players go in order to kind of create that really new team that actually sets us on the new trajectory. I think we still have a couple of players of old, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think if we want to go forward, if we want to be competitive, if we want to really kind of like grab this by the cojones, then I think we need to restructure a bit.
Well, you say I think we need to let some key players go. I don't think that's the case. I don't think we'll let any key players go. I think we'll obviously discuss this once the season's finished and we can do a bit of a recap and our future look at the season. But I expect, obviously, we'll want to sign some new players. I expect in making those signings, we will have to shift some players on. But I think, you know, consider the fact that people like Mbabu are still registered as a Premier League player. He's not going to be with us next season, so that opens a spot. We'll lose Dan James, Shane Duffy. Who else have we got there? Cedric Suarez. You know, all we do is shift our loan players on and potentially replace them with permanent signings, and we open up 4 spots. And then there's guys like Jay Stansfield who doesn't need to be registered because he's an under 21. Same with Luke Harris. So I think we'll shift on the obvious players, but I don't think there'll be any huge surprises. I've heard a few people mentioning maybe blokes like Neeskins might get shifted on. You know, we were talking about Harry Wilson getting shifted on. It's quite possible that Fulham actually look at cashing in on Wilson after he's performed really well if we think that there's an opportunity to make a big profit on him. Yeah, I mean, Robinson's been touted as someone. Dad, do you think there's any other players on the chopping block?
I think Rodak as well.
Oh, Cabano, Rodak. Yeah, who else?
I honestly think anybody who isn't a regular starter who you think definitively I want to be either on the sub bench or in the team, I think we need to take a serious consideration and go, is this person going to get us where we need to be in the future?
You know, maybe Vinny gets sold, and maybe he's done enough to actually attract some interest. Maybe he's on the high that we need to actually sell him to buy someone, you know, much better.
The biggest problem is you don't want to make too many changes. We saw it when we came up and spent 100 mil. Yeah. Your team doesn't gel quick enough if you make too many changes. If we dropped, you know, 6 players who were in our starting squad out of the club completely and then replace them with 6 new people, it would take a long time for that to actually click. And I'm worried that it potentially wouldn't click. And I think Marco will want to strengthen in some key positions and bring in some key players, but I don't think he'll mess with it too much. I think it's obvious that we need probably a backup centre-back. It's obvious that we need someone to back up the central midfield positions and a backup striker, and then maybe we'd look at a starting winger and maybe someone to replace Pereira as a starting attacking midfielder. But really, there's not a huge amount that you need to do to shift this side on and take them from 10th to 8th, which is a realistic step for next season.
In reflecting on your original question about, you know, what I think about 10th, I think given our resources, given our squad, given the quality that we have, I think this reflects incredibly strongly on Marco Silva's trickery, his knack at actually pulling off some pretty great performances notwithstanding some injuries, it's like, Solomon and Harry Wilson out early in the season, Pelini are out for weeks, Mitro out for weeks, and, even at the back end of the season, Tim Ream and Pereira out for weeks. These are really big chunks out of this team's squad, and he still pulled it off. Now, if we don't have a really significantly successful transfer season or post season transfer window, whatever you want to call it, if we're not successful there, I'm a bit nervous about our ability to realistically do that again and consistently do that and perform so well with what we've got. You do it. The against you, because all you need to do is be playing really well, but just get a ton of shit injuries, and you're buggered. So it does come down to he's proven he can do it. We absolutely have to spend money to lock ourselves into that mid-table at a minimum.
Well, there's no argument that we've overperformed this year. Like, it's statistically proven that Fulham have overperformed far more than almost any other side in the league. We have, Bernd Leno is statistically the second best keeper in the league this season in terms of expected goals conceded compared to how many goals we've actually conceded. Same with expected points as well. We're miles ahead, so we do need to strengthen. And I think if we don't, we might be in a bit of trouble. But I'd also argue that it's the same. Sorry, there's a coughing fit in the middle there.
Good.
I'd also argue it's the same for any team in the Premier League. If you don't strengthen in the off season, you're possibly just going to fall away. And I think we saw it with Leicester. They didn't properly strengthen, and they've disappeared because they couldn't properly strengthen because of their model that they've stuck with. I think Fulham, all they need to do is hold on to their key players, which I think we'll do, because I don't think we're going to lose Mitro, we're not going to lose Pelini, we're not going to lose Leno, and they're our key players for me. I know there's other players around them that are important to the way we play, but those three especially are incredibly important to Fulham, and it's very noticeable when those three are not playing individually how much it affects the way we play. If we hold on to those three and then just strengthen what we've currently got to make sure, and look, I actually don't think we could have been any more unlucky than we were this season with injuries. Yeah. We lost Wilson, who is probably our starting winger, for half of the season. Mitro was either unfit or banned for almost half of the season. We've been fortunate with Leno, but we've lost defensive players, we've lost midfielders to suspensions. Like, we've been incredibly unlucky this season. I think next season, if we just strengthen a little bit, we'll be in a much better position.
Optimism.
Point made. Guys, I think we can probably talk about the lineups very shortly. Biggest thing for me, I think Fulham, most likely unchanged. Do you guys see any changes to that Fulham side that played Palace last week?
No.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place with our injuries. I think we're kind of deadlocked to this team that started against Palace.
I mean, the only changes potentially you could see would be Suarez to start at either right or left back. I don't see that happening. Lukic to possibly start in place of Harrison Reed. I don't see that happening.
No.
Yeah. Maybe a change on the wings, but it would be BDR or Solomon starting in place of Willian or Wilson. Don't see that happening.
Nope.
And Vinicius starting against Man United rather than Mitro. Not going to happen.
Well, that makes sense.
So I think you're right with the injuries we've got and what we've got available to us. It does make sense to see an unchanged side. Like I said, I think Man United, we will see some changes. I was going to try and predict Man United 11. I actually thought it was completely pointless because I genuinely think they could name 11 completely different players from what I actually put out there. So what we'll do, Sammy, we'll jump forward and finish off this episode with a little taste of, if I can put it on the screen, cottage cheese.
Oh, yep. Get that savory stuff in your mouth. Now I've gone for a bit of a different one because we've been doing Fulham players in various scenarios all season, and I imagine in the off season we're probably going to go through an award ceremony of sorts. So we're going to be talking about those guys a lot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to completely restructure the side with some of the best would you rather musical acts that I feel could fill certain positions. Now, I've broken this up into just 5 key places. So we're going to start off really, really strong. Now, your defensive back line, would you rather Coldplay or ZZ Top? Bear in mind, Coldplay are really tall.
ZZ Top. Intimidation.
Yeah.
That's what I reckon as well.
Just look a bit harder, a bit more metronomic.
I don't know. I feel like Chris Martin can maybe get in the air. He's like 6'4". He's massive.
I think he's a big softy, though.
Central midfield. Any 2 members of Oasis or any 2 members of Blur?
I'd like to have one
Oasis,
from each, actually.
One from each would be good. But I think Oasis, just for just pure shithousery. It'd be like having Polina and Johansson in the side together.
Yeah, no, I imagine Blair would probably be like more structured and methodical, and it would just be relatively pointless and ineffective. Okay. Wingers. Any 2 members of BTS or any 2 members of One Direction?
I don't really know BTS.
I know that they're Korean, and I will racistly assume that Koreans are very fast. And to be fair, their dance moves are really they're really quick.
That's a really weird. I'm going
to have to cut that, Sammy. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut that. Anyway,
have you seen
I'm going to say no,
so
Sammy,
quick.
Stop. I'm going to have to say One Direction purely because you see way too many wingers with that One Direction haircut.
Dad, what were you going to ask? Oh, is Dad still here? Is Dad...
No.
Nope,
Yeah, keep going.
Lost him.
Okay. Your number 10, your playmaker.
Continue.
Prince or Sting?
Prince. Bit of flair in the middle.
I'm going Prince.
I think I've lost you guys.
Oh, no, you're still here.
It's all right. Sam's quiz has lost us as well, to be fair.
Goalkeeping. Kurt Novoselic from Nirvana or Mick Fleetwood. To give you an idea, Chris Novoselic is 6'9".
6'9".
Oh, I lost that.
I'm going to go with Mick Fleetwood. I think he reminds me a bit of Bruce Grobbelaar, a bit wild in goal. I think he'd be, and he's good with his arms as well. Like I can see Mick Fleetwood.
Yeah, no, he waves around a lot. I like it. And finally, your striker. Now I've gone for a target man position, so we're going to go Barry White or Luther Vandross. Just strong and big.
It's got to be Vandross. I can't imagine Barry White's getting around very quick.
Are you kidding me? Huh? I'm putting Barry White up there. Barry White's massive. I wouldn't mess with Barry White. And that's your cottage cheese. That's your full lineup. I'm sure we can set up that team somewhere.
Well, that was incredibly weird, Sam, but not unexpected as per usual.
There you go.
Guys, it's been really enjoyable to go through our final preview of the season. It's been such a great season, and I really hope that we're getting to a stage now where we play this final game and we're potentially looking at a really good result to finish off what has been just an absolute dream of a first season back in the Premier League under Marco Silva. It's been really enjoyable doing these previews throughout the whole year, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat in the off season, looking at our players of the season, looking forward towards some transfers, how we think we might line up next season, and also our big That's So Craven quiz as well, which we'll be announcing very soon. So, guys, thank you again for joining me today. Dad, thanks for putting the time aside this morning. I know we had to drag you out of bed to get here.
Well, fair enough too. Saturday morning. But yeah, good chat. Enjoyed it.
We're going to have to get that new router for you as well. Jeez, the lag is terrible.
Well,
anyway, Sammy, thank you again for joining us this morning.
In all fairness to Dad, I'm 2 hours in front of him, and I was still in bed as well. So, like, credit to him for getting up 2 hours before I would.
You guys need to babysit more often. You'll be up at 5:30 like I was.
Ugh, yuck.
I've had 3 kids. I'm done.
Dad's in retirement. It's been great. No, looking forward to the weekend, and I look forward to the closing out of like the season pod because it's been really special, and I will save all my emotional responses for the final one. Just give the people what they want, you know.
Oh God. Well, you know what? I'll let you have a bit of an emotional one now. Why don't you close it out, Sammy?
You'll let me? Okay. So, not only has this season been incredly wonderful...
no, I don't want a full speech. I just want you to say, come on, you whites.
No, he just wanted you to say, come on, you whites.
What was that about?
No,
I was giving you the opportunity to monologue.
Yeah, I did. I was ready for a monologue. I got ready for it.
Absolutely.
Also, can we talk about my quick thinking? Because I was ready to go. You gave me a second's notice, and I was ready to pull that out of my ass. So I'm not having
absolutely
any of this.
not.
And come on, you whites.